Hello and welcome. This is Matthias 76. Together, we are decoding the deception, and we are continuing here in our journey through the book of Genesis. We're in chapter 31, and we're still in the midst of the narrative about Jacob. Jacob had gone up north. He was sent away by his mother and father because his brother Esau was less than pleased with his actions and his trickery and his deceit. But they also wanted to make sure that he married a wife from their family. They didn't want a wife for him from the land of Canaan. And an interesting thing on that, it never says that the people back in Haran, where Abram had come from, and where Rebekah had come from, that they were believers. It says quite the opposite. In Joshua, it tells us that they worshiped false gods. But the Lord did not want the ties with the people of Canaan, because that would create issues later on. And that's exactly what happens in the book of Joshua and afterward in the time of the Judges, when the Jews, the Israelites, did not get rid of all of the people there and send them out or do away with them, and they intermarried with them. That's where a lot of the problems with the worship of false gods, Asherah, Baal, Molech, everything else, where that found its origin. That was its ingress point into the children of God. But Jacob had gone back up to Haran, and he's been dealing with his very deceptive father-in-law, Laban, and we're going to see this play out, and the story is going to, in a number of ways, come full circle. So let's jump in, and this is a fairly lengthy chapter. There is a lot to cover. I want to get it all done today, so I'm going to do a lot of big slugs of reading at one time, and then I might just comment on them as we go through. Now, Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, "Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has acquired all his wealth." Remember, Jacob did that thing with the spotted and speckled. Laban thought he was tricking Jacob, but Jacob knew he was tricking Laban. And if we throw that into the scales of justice, so to speak, Jacob was in the right. Laban was trying to rip him off. Laban had been deceitful with Jacob again and again and again. But Laban's sons, who would inherit all of Laban's goods and flocks and herds, they were not happy with Jacob because they saw Jacob's wealth increasing and their wealth decreasing. But there really wasn't anything that in a just way that they could do about it, because you could tell whose was whose by what was spotted and speckled and what wasn't. Verse 2, "And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and indeed it was not favorable toward him as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, 'Return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you.'" Countenance, that's not a word that we use a lot. We'll talk about somebody's got a nasty look, or kind of giving you the stink eye. The countenance is their appearance, their face, how they look at you. You can tell what they're thinking, and it was no longer favorable toward Jacob. When did Jacob decide to go home? Jacob decided to go back home when the Lord, Yahweh, told him to go back home. That's when he was going to go back home, and not before. We'll see in a little while. It's been 20 years that he has been there up in Haran, and we'll just pop the map up. He's way up here. Home is way down here. And this journey right here That is about 100 miles. So that gives you an idea of how far it is. We'll talk about that journey a little bit more in just a little bit. And what did the Lord say to him? Return to the land of your fathers. Go back home. Go where your kin are. And to your family, that includes Esau, and I will be with you. When he says, I will be with you, it brings to mind to Jacob what the Lord had said to him, standing atop that ziggurat, that ladder, as it is commonly known, Jacob's ladder, and the sons of God going up and down upon it. Way back in Genesis 28, that was on his journey away from home up to Haran. So he's reminding him, I'm going to bless you. That's what I promised you on the way up. That's what I'm promising you now. And how important in your life is the knowledge of God's constant blessing, that he's going to be with you. He's going to take care of you. And we like to use the statement from Joshua, the opening of Joshua, I will be with you. I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Those important concepts that God is with us. He is the one who blesses us, even though we go through difficult times, and oftentimes, even though we put ourselves in difficult situations. Because as with Jacob, so also with David, and also so often with us, the problems we encounter are of our own doing. We make mistakes. We make bad decisions. We fail. We come up short. But God's grace, it is the overarching theme, an overarching theme in the scriptures. God's grace is bigger than our sin. God's grace is bigger than our shortcomings. His blessings are bigger than our failures. That isn't a license to sin and just charge off with reckless abandon and willful desire to just do what we want. Most certainly not. But he knows who we are. He knows we are but dust. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field, to his flock, and said to them, I see your father's countenance, that it has not been favorable toward me as before, but the God of my father has been with me, and you know that with all my might I have served your father, yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not allow him to hurt me. If he said thus, the speckled shall be your wages, then the flocks bore speckled. And if he said thus, the streaked shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked. So God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. Little details, direction, geography can be very important. Where does he go? He sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field. He's doing this on the down low. He doesn't want anyone to hear, because people back in the camp, in their encampment, and where they lived, might hear and go and report to Laban. He's being sneaky. It is what he is doing. And he just shares with them, this is what I've seen. You know, your dad is no longer favorable toward me. And that doesn't bode well for the future. When you are dealing with someone who is dishonest by nature, then you have to assume he'll find a way to get me. He's going to find a way to get me. Yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. Now, was it 10 times? No, it is a figure of speech. We would say time and again, and I could show, I'm not going to do it now just for the sake of time, but there are many instances in the Old Testament when they say it was 10 times, that this happened. 10 times you did that. It's just a figure of speech. But God did not allow him to hurt me. As messed up as Jacob was in many ways, is flawed. That's a more generous way of saying it. Because I don't want people to think of me as messed up. I'd much rather them think of me as flawed. And I am. as flawed as Jacob was, he never forgot that God was looking out for him. God doesn't call us to be perfect. Now, we strive to be faithful and true to his desires as we can be. God doesn't expect us to be faithful because he knows who we are. He knows what we are. He does desire and require that we be faithful. And that is what we see in Jacob. God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. We'll get a more full explanation of that later on, that it was God's plan in all of this. It helps make sense out of that strange practice that Jacob had done with the alder branches and stripping bark out of them, off of them, and putting them before the flocks when they were breeding. We'll get to that. And it happened at the time when the flocks conceived, here we go, that I lifted my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the flocks were streaked, speckled, and gray spotted. Leaped upon, that means the Bible uses euphemism all the time. They were breeding up on top of, the rams were on top of the ewes. Then the angel of God spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here I am. And he said, Lift your eyes now and see. All the rams which leap on the flocks are streaked, speckled, and gray spotted, for I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar, and where you made a vow to me. Now arise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your family. Okay, so that weird thing that he did, and we'll get more details on it even more later, it was a thing from God. God showed this to him. Do this this way. That's all interesting. It kind of explains that Jacob wasn't just off on some weird lark on his own, but there's something of vital importance here to identifying who the angel of God is, who the angel of the Lord is. It says, the angel of God spoke to me in a dream. The angel of God. That's who this is, the angel of God. And then Jacob says, Here I am. What else do you say when God comes to you? Here I am. It's like saying present. Here, speak, I'm listening. And he tells him what to do. But then down here in verse 13, I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar and where you made a vow to me. What happened back there in Genesis 28, 13 to 15? Well, let's go and take a look. And behold, the Lord, this is on the ladder, and behold, the Lord, Yahweh, here, I'll show you. There it is right here. That's Yahweh. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham your father and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your descendants. We spent time talking about this then, right? About him reminding Jacob and affirming to Jacob that the promises that applied to Abraham and Isaac also apply to him, confirming that the blessing that he received from Abraham was indeed valid in God's sight. But here, we're told that it's the same God, but how is he identified? The angel of God. So, file this away. File this away. This is important stuff, okay? And it's good to remember where things are, because when you want to tell someone, or you're trying to remember for yourself who the angel of the Lord is, who the angel of God is, how do you prove that it is actually Yahweh? We've got it right here in verse 11, 12, and 13. The angel of God says, I'm the God of Bethel. And you go back to Genesis 28, 13 through 15, and he says that he is the God of Abraham and Isaac, etc. So this is standalone the most important passage for positively identifying the angel of God, the angel of the Lord, as Yahweh himself. All you have to remember is Genesis 31, 11 to 13, and 28, 13 to 15. Not that hard. File it away. It is of great importance, and it's something that will serve you well. Okay. I got to do something here. I got too many screens open, and my Bible program causes other things. The glitch. Here we go. Now we'll do it again. Cucumber. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, remember, they're in this clandestine meeting out there away from the camp. Is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not considered strangers by him? For he has sold us and also completely consumed our money. For all these riches which God has taken away from our father are really ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it. Rachel and Leah know their dad has been being crooked. He's been being deceptive. And by being deceptive, whom is he robbing? He's robbing his daughters and their children of what should be theirs, what they needed to be okay and be taken care of. And if you want to make mom mad, take stuff away from her kids. Do her kids wrong. And you're not going to keep them on your side, right? They realize our dad doesn't care about us. He is fixated on wealth and power, and God has taken it away from him and given it to us, and it should have been ours in the first place, right? Verse 17. And don't forget the big theme. God takes care of his own. Then Jacob rose and set his sons and wives on camels, and he carried away all his livestock and all his possessions which he had gained, his acquired livestock which he had gained in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Now let's stop. And perhaps some of you came from a big family. And I think of back when our children were young, and we were blessed to raise 6 children, and we would go on vacation or move, which we did on multiple occasions. Just the chaos that ensued, what it took to pack everything up just to go on vacation, right? All the things that had to be done before you left the house, and the instructions for whoever was coming to take care of the animals and water the plants, and all of that. Just getting out of the house was a huge issue. And we had cars with trunks or a van to put the luggage into and all of that. And we weren't packing up and taking with us a whole lot of livestock. And it's clear from the text, he's got vast herds and flocks. And we'll see that in detail when we get to him meeting up with Esau and sending the 3 camps ahead of him. Can you imagine what all was involved in doing this? What an operation it was. And then, and this is something we always have to think of when people are traveling in biblical times, we think of it most frequently in connection with the Exodus. It's one thing if you've got a bunch of men of combat age and they are going out on an excursion. And so far, the heat's not too awful bad in here. They are going off on an excursion. It's fairly easy to calculate with some camels how much they can travel in a day. It is a different thing altogether when you have women, when you have children of young age mixed in with children of older age, and then all the livestock. You can only move livestock so far in a day. You can only do it so far. They have to stop, they have to eat, they have to rest. No matter what, there are ewes that are carrying lambs, there are cows that are carrying calves, everything else. You can only move so far. This is a big deal, and they can only go so fast. And I go into all of that because we see part of of Jacob's thinking as to the timing. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household idols that were her father's, and Jacob stole away, unknown to Laban the Syrian, in that he did not tell him that he intended to flee. So he fled. With all that he had, he arose and crossed the river and headed toward the mountains of Gilead. He waited. Timing is important. He didn't live right there like, oh, across the street's Grandpa Laban, right? You had to spread out because of flocks and grazing and water. So they already were a distance away from where Laban was. But then you've got this. It was time to shear his sheep. Shearing sheep was a huge undertaking, and I'll tell you what. And there might be some of you out there who have sheared sheep. There might be some of you out there who have seen it in person. Shearing sheep is literally back-breaking work. I encourage you, Google sheep shearing, and then they'll show it with people using mechanical shearing devices to do it. Imagine doing it with shears that basically were like the old lawn shears that you had to squeeze the things to cut the wool off of the sheep. It was a long, intensive, exhausting process. And that's what Laban and all the men went to do it. They'd go out and they'd get to work shearing the sheep. It was a big deal. It took weeks, and it was a big focus, and you had to expend a lot of energy to do it. So while that's going on is when Jacob says, it's time to scoot, we're going to go. And Rachel had stolen away the household idols. We'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. That were her father's. And Jacob stole away unknown to who? Laban, the what? The what? The Syrian. That's not just in there for no reason. It's reminding us he's different. He's not one of us. He's that guy up there in what today is known as Syria. So he fled with all that he had, and he headed toward the mountains of Gilead. Let's talk about the household idols really quickly because it's confusing. Why would she take these household idols? What are they? Etc. The word that is used here, is a word that was used for little images of family members who had died. Now, this isn't necessarily saying that they worshiped their ancestors. In some instances, in different varied cultures in the region, they might have. But for you, and you can especially think of perhaps your parents' house or your grandparents' house, on the walls, what do you see? You see pictures. You see pictures of their parents who are gone, of great-grandparents who are long gone, of a beloved family member who is gone. Well, guess what? In that day, you didn't have Kodak moments, and you didn't have digital cameras. We have a thing that's in a digital screen that we have thousands of pictures on of the family that cycle through every few seconds, a new picture. They didn't have anything like that. So what would they do? To remember their loved ones, they would have these little statues of them made of gold, silver, whatever, depending on the individual's wealth and how important the person was to them. The word that's used here, there are many words that can be translated as idols, is that thing, that kind of statue. But it was something very important to the family. It had great sentimental value. Okay? I'm not saying that Laban didn't worship idols, that he may well have. His idols may have played a part in his worship, but that's not likely what these particular images, because image and idol, it's the same thing, images were. So they scoot off, took all that they had, and they headed toward the mountains of Gilead. They're heading south. Now we're going to talk for just a moment here, back to the map, And you may wonder, and I've mentioned this before, you may wonder why it is when it says they're traveling from up here in Haran, why they take the route that they do. I've mentioned this before. I'll mention it again because it's important. Roads are built where roads are built for a reason. They connect important things. Back in times past, and it's still the case here, where I live, almost every single road is named ferry or bridge. I'm in North Georgia, north of Atlanta, and the Chattahoochee River and others wind through here, and there are tons of roads named so-and-so bridge, so-and-so ferry. They built those bridges and ferries for a reason because there was water. Well, in this instance, I've zoomed in here to where it shows the route that they would have taken, and they didn't leave a travel log. You know, they weren't blogging along the way, and this is my vacation going back home. That's not what was going on. But the ancient roadways, do you see what's here? And hopefully on your screen, it comes through. I'm going to zoom in one more click. Do you see what's there? Rivers. And then they're going to get down here. Why do they decide to head east? Because that's the Euphrates River. You need water. And if you've got vast flocks and herds, guess what? They need water. And then you got to a place like this and you had to tough it out across there. But you can see it's kind of green in the background. It was a more fertile, lush area. They went where they went because of water. And Laban was told on the third day, so they've already been gone 3 days. There was a journey that, and if you imagine this, and we'll just draw a diagram in our mind, and we'll pop the map back up just so some things hopefully can make some sense time-wise. So let's say, and I'm just making this up for example, that Jacob is here where this little flag is, and Laban's up over here where his flocks are, and they're up there shearing the sheep. Jacob takes off and leaves, and he's got a 3-day head start, and then Laban gets word, and Laban's not bringing all his flocks, and Laban's not bringing the women and the kids. They're just boogieing after them when they go to find them. But that picture in mind helps make sense of things. And Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. Then he took his brethren with him and pursued him for 7 days' journey, and he overtook him in the mountains of Gilead. Now, 7 days' journey, the day he got the news, it's not like you could go whip by the quick stop, gas up the car, grab some snacks, and take off. They had to prepare for the journey. So it might have been a full other day before they got to leave. He overtook him in the mountains of Gilead. And we're not going to get into the intricacies of where Gilead was and how far that was, because it's kind of hard to put your finger on. But God had come to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said to him, "Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad." Let's just talk about that. Laban, and he's going to say, "I have the power to do you harm, but your God appeared to me." God makes it clear in this, speak neither good nor bad. He's saying, don't threaten him. Don't touch him. Don't do anything to him. And when God Almighty appears to you in a dream and says that to you, apart from the words, do you think that there is also a sense, a realization of the power that is addressing you? He's saying, don't you even think about it. Don't you even think about it. Don't you touch them. Don't you hurt them. God is watching out for and taking care of Jacob and Rachel and Leah and Bilhah and all the kids, because his blessing is upon them. He's keeping the promise that he made to Jacob back at Bethel when he appeared there on top of the ladder, that he would take care of him and that he would bring him back and that his descendants would inherit this land. God keeps his promises, and sometimes it doesn't. It's hard for, this is the best way to put it, I believe. It's hard for us to see how God is keeping his promises. Look at the world today. Look at the madness. Look at the confusion. Look at the disintegration of society, the societal meltdown of everything that is good and holy and just and worthwhile that we see. It's hard for us to see how God's plan for the salvation of man is being carried out and fulfilled. But I don't have to see it to know that it's true. And God gives us, get this, he gives us countless examples in the scripture of that very thing. You don't have to be able to see it. You don't have to know how. You just have to believe. Just like Abraham believed the Lord, and it was credited to him, counted to him as righteousness. Do you think Abraham understood back in Genesis 12 and 15 how God was going to do all that stuff? No. And Abram's life makes it clear he didn't understand how, but he trusted. He believed. He was faithful. And so let us also trust, believe, and be faithful. Do you see that this stuff isn't just about a bunch of people with weird names and weird culture long ago, 4,000 years ago, that doesn't have any impact and bearing on us? It is God's record of his saving work that is there not just to tell us how he brought about our salvation, but to encourage us, to give us example that by looking to them and seeing their faith, we might so be encouraged, being, as Hebrews 11 tells us, surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. And let's go take a look at that. Good time to go look at Hebrews 11. When you're feeling down, when you feel like everything's just in a downward spiral in the toilet bowl of this world, it's a good time. Go look at Hebrews 11. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. Faith, elders, Jacob. By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which were seen were not made of things which were invisible. Everything we believe, we cannot point to and say this is how it happened. Everything we're told in Genesis 1, we can't understand it. Chapter 12, after you read through chapter 11, and go do that. Here's something to do. You know, you're listening to this video, so the word of God and your faith matter to you. That's why we do this. That's why I put it out here for you. But do something more. Just commit this week to yourself. Do something more this week than you did last week in your pursuit of understanding who your God is, in seeking to draw closer to him and to give his hand that holds hold of your hand just a little bit tighter squeeze. Go read Hebrews 11 and then the first verse of chapter 12, after all those things that we're told about the saints and the faithful. Therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher, perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. If you do that, because sometime this week, you're going to feel a little bit down and overwhelmed about something, go read Hebrews 11 and this first part of Hebrews 12, and you will feel lifted up. That cloud of witnesses will encourage you and strengthen you. So Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mountains, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mountains of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, What have you done? We'll just stop right there. This is almost word for word. And right here, over here, and I get feedback that people tell me, you do that, you show something, and then it's so small on our screen, we don't get to see it, and then you move on. This phrase right here, me asiyatha, that right there, what have you done? And that is the quote of what Jacob said when he woke up with Leah instead of Rachel, and he threw on his drawers and ran out of the tent and found Laban and said this, what have you done? And now, right here, do you see the first word? And I can't use my cursor because I'm zoomed in on it. And it goes from right to left. You've got the two characters and then the dash and then the zoth. That's this. This is, what is this? But it's still the same, you have done to me. There are many things in the account of Jacob that things come full circle. So Laban had deceived Jacob, and now Jacob is being asked by Laban, what is this? What is that? What have you done? What have you done? What did you do? What is this you have done? That you have stolen away unknown to me and carried away my daughters like captives with the sword. Now, Laban, on top of being a deceitful dude, he's a drama queen. He just is. He just blows everything up and he praises everything. It's like a diplomat. Diplomats gild the lily. They use this flowery speech to position the thinking way over here on this side of the issue because they know the other person is going to be way over on the other side of the issue, and then they can work toward a common ground. But what Laban says here is pretty much absurd. And I'll say it right now. Should Jacob have run off in the night? Probably not. But if he had told Laban, what do you think Laban would have done? With his sons who already had the sour face looking at Jacob, and Laban already wasn't happy with Jacob. Do you think that this crook, Laban, would have let Jacob leave with all the things that he had worked, and he's going to say it, 20 years to get? Do you think he would have let him go? Not a chance. I'll quit yakking and we'll read through. And Laban said to Jacob, what have you done? That you have stolen away unknown to me and carried away my daughters like captives taken with the sword. Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and songs, with timbrel and harp. Yeah, right. Not a chance. And you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly in so doing. Now, that part's true. You ran away from Grandpa, and this isn't like you were going home from vacation at Grandma and Grandpa's house and you'd see him again at Christmas. This was a forever goodbye, and there wasn't a goodbye. He just snuck away, but I don't think we have to try real hard to understand why. Now, listen to what he says next. It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night saying, be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. And now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Here's the point he's really getting to. Here's the point he's really getting to. All this other stuff, it's positioning. It's framing things in such a way, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. The thing that he really cares about, probably along with saying goodbye to the grandkids, is that you stole away my gods. And that's that. Here it does say Elohim. Now we talked about that word before, what those idols were. And that word is teraphim. And it's one of many words used for idols. And this goes back to the divine council worldview and understanding how things work in the minds of the people of this day and the language that the scriptures use. Elohim, and we'll go look at the word here. Put it up on the screen so everybody can see it. Okay. And this is it right here. And this is possessive for my at the end is why it looks different. But the word is Elohim. Elohim. That is the word for God. But it is also the word for spiritual beings. It is also a word that is used of the souls of those who are dead. We think of the word God, and we think capital G-O-D, God, the God, God Most High, and He is. But that word is used in many different ways. They could use this word to be referring to the souls of their departed ancestors. But we see this and we think that that means that for sure what Rachel had stolen away were indeed idols. But it doesn't point to that in the way that we think that it would. Elohim also stood for souls of the dead. It stood for many other things as well. And I one time I talk about it. I just need to do a video on the divine council worldview and how they thought about and understood rightly the supernatural world to work, because it's different than the way we think of it. And I need to do that at some point. But needless to say, this could be pointing to those teraphim being images of his grandparents, etc. All it means. And that's not saying that Rachel wasn't a worshiper of false gods before Jacob came along, because guess what? We're told that they were up there. Then Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, perhaps you would take your daughters from me by force. With whomever you find the gods, do not let him live. In the presence of our brethren, identify what I have of yours and take it with you. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So he's saying, right here in front of everybody, in the court of public opinion, you find something that's yours, that person will die. They took it. And there's no way, with the understanding they had before about the spotted and speckled flocks, etc., that Laban could claim any of that to be his, and the goods that Jacob had gotten by trading some of his livestock and buying possessions with it, and possibly servants. Who knows what? He had to have servants in order to take this huge conglomeration of flocks and herds with him back down to Canaan. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and into the two maids' tents, but he did not find them, the teraphim, those idols of family ancestors. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols, put them in the camel's saddle, and sat on them. And Laban searched all about the tent, but he did not find them. And she said to her father, let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is with me. And he searched but did not find the household idols. She's saying, can't get up. It was that time of the month for her, and we'll be delicate here. They didn't have all the personal sanitation devices that exist in the world today, and people would respect that. So what do we learn here? What do we learn here? It's a family tradition. Laban was deceitful. Rebekah, his sister, was deceitful in what she did to her own husband, Isaac, and sending Jacob in dressed up as Esau. And guess what? Jacob's deceitful, and Rachel, his favorite wife, she's pretty good at being tricksy herself. Then, and think of the emotional energy that's here. What had happened? He fled away in fear. Now Laban has come upon him, made this accusation that to Jacob, says he didn't know, is an absurd accusation Kind of like, okay, he tried to come up with something to accuse me of, because he can't accuse me of stealing the flocks because they're mine. You can look at them. See, spot, speckled, they're mine. He at this point is just ready to blow. Just blow up. What is my trespass? What is my sin that you have so hotly pursued me? Although you have searched all my things, what part of your household things have you found? Set it here before my brethren and your brethren, that they may judge between us both. These 20 years, and he's mad, and he's letting them have it, and he's doing it in front of everyone. Okay, and there's something I forgot to mention. There's so much to cover in this section. The language that's used and how things go. Laban is using language when he says that stuff up there about leaving, etc. He's using language as though Jacob was part of his household and had been taken in as part of his household. The fact of the matter is, in the way they viewed things and the way business was conducted, and, you know, here I'm talking in particular to all the farmers out there who maybe are farming with a son-in-law, whatever, and the agreements they have about the 2,500 acres that they're farming and how it works and how profits are shared, etc. He talks to Jacob as though Jacob has been taken into the family, but Jacob was never treated like he was taken into the family. He got ripped off, connived, and forced to labor to just benefit a little bit, to get wives, to get the flocks and herds. He wasn't treated that way, but that's the way Jacob is talked to by Laban. Laban wants to have it both ways. I've treated you like an outsider. I've taken advantage of you, but when it suits me, oh, you're harming the family. Well, he was never part of the family. Laban never treated him like part of the family. So Jacob, after 20 years, think of a lousy situation you've put up with at work, or perhaps with a relative for a long, long, long period of time, and you were powerless to do anything about it. And when you finally voice how you feel about it, boy, it comes out in a torrent. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and female goats have not miscarried their young, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. I've busted my tail taking care of your animals. That which was torn by beasts, I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it. You required it from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was in the day. The drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. It's hard work doing what Jacob did. It's hard work. We have this idyllic, life on the farm, Farmer Brown kind of bopping around, doing his stuff on the farm. I tell you what, I grew up working on a farm. Livestock. It is working. You know, the one thing I concluded after about 6 years of doing it, I'm not going to do this all my life. This is too daggone hard. You don't get a day off. You don't get a night off, and the weather doesn't matter. That's what Jacob is saying he's put up with. Thus I have been in your house 20 years. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. Again and again is what we would say. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear, notice it's capitalized. It's capitalized twice, fear. And that's saying that's God, fear, the fear he puts on someone. And the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. Do you think Laban would have done that? What do you think? Let's just do some spitballing here. Looking at his character, look at what he's done. Do you think that if God hadn't appeared to him, he would have just let Jacob go with all that stuff? No, it was in his power to take it away by worldly standards. Would have been wrong, but he could have done it, and his character tells us he would have done it. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. Ooh. He didn't say God warned you. He says God rebuked you. He put you in your place. And it is in that courage, we have to understand, that Jacob is speaking to him. Okay, got a few more minutes to go and we'll get this wound up. And Laban answered and said to Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children my children, and this flock is my flock. All that you see is mine. Now, how in the world can he say that? Do you know that many people who are of this mindset, who deceive and take, they think they really deserve it all. That's why they can justify what they do. In no court of that day, in the council of elders of a community, would they have said, yeah, that's all your stuff. They wouldn't have said that. You made an agreement. You struck a bargain. None of it's yours, but Laban views it all as being his. He's messed up. He's messed up, and he's not going to change now. But what can I do this day to these, my daughters, or to them, or to their children whom they have borne? Now, therefore, come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. Now, the first rational thing he's done, in order, if Jacob was part of his family clan, a covenant wouldn't be appropriate. It's family. It's family. That's different. He is here acknowledging, or maybe it's that God forced him to acknowledge, Jacob is separate. He's apart. He's distinct. He's not yours to do with as you choose. And should have said this a long time ago. Understand that in this day, this is a patriarchal society, and that means more than it's all about dad. Dad was like judge, jury, executioner. He was the governor. He was dad. He was the religious leader. He was all that stuff. That's what's meant by patriarchal society. Now, because God forces him, I don't think he's come to the realization. He just doesn't have a choice. He's being forced to deal with Jacob as a separate and distinct equal because they're making a covenant. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. Sound familiar? What did he do back there in chapter 28 after he had the vision of God? He set up a pillar. Then Jacob said to his brethren, gather stones, and they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there on the heap. Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha, and Jacob called it Galid. And Jegar in Aramaic means heap of witness, and in Hebrew, Galid means heap of witness. And just so you know, Aramaic is simply another Semitic language. They're closely related in a lot of ways, but they had a different word for it. They each called it their own thing. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore, its name was called Galid. Also, Mizpah, which means, well, doesn't tell us what Mizpah means. Because he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent one from another. If you afflict my daughters, or if you take other wives beside my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. He is expressing some concern for his daughters. He's not going to have any say or input on what goes on in their lives from this day forth. He'll never see them again. Then Laban said to Jacob, here is this heap, and here is this pillar which I have placed between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, that I will not pass beyond this heap to you, and you will not pass beyond this heap and this pillar to me for harm. Kind of like kings. This is the borderline. This is the boundary. You're not going to come and make war on my side of it. Sorry. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor and the God of their father judge between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, referring to God as the fear of the Lord. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his brethren to eat bread, and they ate bread and stayed all night on the mountain. And early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his sons and daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. The wording of this, and Nahor is the ancestor on that side of the family. He's saying These are two different gods in Laban's mind. The God of Abraham, Yahweh, and the God of Nahor. The God of Nahor, I think I made a note here. Yeah, Hadad. Hadad would have been that God. In a covenant, in an agreement that two parties would make, if they had different gods, they'd say, your God's a judge and my God's a judge. They would call on those gods as a judge, and that is what we see here. But the big picture here, the big takeaway that we want to have in mind is how we see here God taking care of Jacob no matter what. And what is he doing? He's bringing him back to the land that was promised to Abraham, to Isaac, and to him. That is important. He can't be off there, up there in Haran, and what is today Syria, forever. He had to bring him home. Now, the thing is, going home isn't always easy. Going home isn't always easy. You can be gone a long time, but when you go back, the problems that you left, guess what? They're still there. And this particular problem is big, it's hairy, it's red, and it's scary, and it's named Esau. And that is what we will talk about next. And in dealing with that and looking at that, we will learn about dealing with fear. This is Matthias 76. Together, we are decoding the deception. God bless and have a great day.